Hello everyone and welcome back to SAFC Fan TV. Sunderland remain managerless as we speak off the back of yet another defeat, and we are due away at Wimbledon on Saturday. Joining me to preview the game and give us a little bit insight in the AFC Wimbledon is lifelong Wimbledon fan and matchday commentator Mike Tagliadoros. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm not so bad, Jack. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm not too good. Not too good. Not too bad. I mean, I suppose I'm not too good in terms of a footballing sense, really, either, though. I touched on the negativity regarding our club at the moment. We're due to play you on Saturday. Can you lift the mood in the Sunderland camp a little bit, Mike? Will you have a little bit of hope going into the weekend?
Well, it's an interesting one, Jack, because as you well know, we're both going through a kind of the mill at the moment in terms of bad runs. Obviously, you guys haven't lost the last three, but ours is a bit more prolonged than that. We've got 6 points from the last 33 and haven't won in 11 games in the league going back to last December.
Well, if there's any side who can help us out, I think that's probably
yeah. I mean, it's probably a good time to kind of excuse me, to probably catch us. I mean, Sunderland got a good record as well against us as well since you come down to League One. We've only picked up 1 point out of 12 up at the Stadium of Light. You've won both of the matches that we've played down in London. Of course, there was that game that got scratched because of the season that was curtailed because of the pandemic. So we didn't get. That was due to be in April of 2020, which of course never got played. So I think it's five wins out of 6 altogether. I think it's just a case of which Sunderland will turn up, because it's interesting to see the away form, because whilst you've done reasonably okay at home. Okay, obviously the 3 defeats are probably against some unexpected teams, but I think away from home you guys generally do better against the teams kind of further down. I know you sort of came to grief last night at Cheltenham, but they did a lot of business in the transfer window. I think they brought in something like 8 new signings, so maybe they're not as bad as perhaps, or not quite as maybe as a pushover as perhaps the league position might perhaps indicate. It's interesting that only 2 teams have conceded more away goals than Sunderland. So it's a case of, I think 2 defences not necessarily playing at their best. Again, I mean, I don't like mentioning the word Bolton. I don't know whether Lee Johnson was maybe, I don't know, a tad unfortunate to get his cards after that, because you guys still up at the right end of the table. Maybe it was just purely the magnitude of the loss and how the shockwaves it caused, not necessarily just amongst the Sunderland fans, but even I sort of stopped. I was having a cup of tea post match, and I saw that. Even I went, huh? It's sort of that, a result like that is obviously going to cause some seismic kind of repercussions. Obviously under caretaker managership at the moment, big obviously cause for the Messiah Roy Keane to come back to the stadium. Right? Obviously, if that can be. If you're still under caretaker managership at the weekend, or whether Roy Keane's in there, that's probably going to tilt things perhaps even further in your favour. But yeah, I mean, it's a sort of game where obviously we got done by Rotherham last night, 1-0 at home. We didn't really lay a glove on them.
There's no, I don't know how the performance ended, but there's no shame, I think, getting beat 1-0 to Rotherham. I mean, we got beat 5-1 after the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's I know we got done 3-0 as well ourselves there back in September. So and they've I didn't realise until today they've only let in 5 goals away from home in the league all season.
Rotherham,
which is absolutely incredible when you think about it. So if they're coming to a team who are not in form, and
we managed more than one game.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was just you're looking at those stats now, and the fact we've only won 2 at home all season. We tend to draw a lot of games. I think Sunderland are 5, 5, and 6. I think it is away from home. So you win some, you lose some, you draw some. Again, generally tend to do better against the teams lower down in the table. So if there was a crumb of comfort I could offer you guys, then it would be, again, it's that kind of the good record you've got against us, and the fact you're coming to a team. Maybe sort of further down the table. So, and again, you've recently shipped, Jermaine Defoe back in, who obviously might be a few years down the line, but he's, you never lose that goal scoring instinct, the ability to play off the shoulder of defenders, get yourselves into space. Even goals from outside the penalty area are something that he, can claim to be a little bit of a specialist at. So, it's if there's a time to play us, it's probably now.
which I would echo in regards of ourselves. Really, I mean, I haven't been able to think of a patch of form that's been quite as bad as this. We've had a few lengthy bad spells in the last few years. With time back in the third division, but I don't think there's been many as bad as this in particular. I mean, you touched on there the managerial situation at the club. We've got, I think it's 3 or 2. We've got a group of interim coaches standing in at the moment, and I don't like to be too harsh, but if I was to sum them up in one word, I would just say absolutely clueless. Right. Last night against Cheltenham, it was obvious, coming out after half time into the second half, that's something that needed to be changed, whether that was a tactical change, a change in formation, or I think the most important for me was a bit personnel, especially in the middle of the park. We were getting a bit overrun, and they left it until I think the 75th minute when we're already 1-1 at this point to make a change. It was after their first goal. I know that was around about 15 to 20 minutes left when we made our first substitution, which just wasn't good enough, really. I mean, if Sunderland are to get a result away in London this weekend, what is it that's going to give at Wimbledon? Where's it going wrong?
Well, I mean, the recent run, I think that's kind of put a lot of maybe disquiet or increasing maybe murmuring, shall we say, amongst the fans has just been the run of form that we've been on. As I've said, 11 games without a victory in the league, 12 if you count the cup competitions, 6 points out of the 33. Again, it's just just general kind of dysfunctionality because we managed to get a draw at Wickham on the 11th of December. And then after that, we had a couple of postponements due to COVID. Portsmouth postponed the following Saturday. Charlton then also postponed the game on Boxing Day. So in the end, we ended up not playing a league game for 18 days, and then we didn't play a game for 10 days after that. And I think initially when we got going again and weren't winning, I think a few people were starting to say, "Oh well, we were doing well before the break or the enforced absence." And we just needed to maybe get a couple of games under our belt to click back into that kind of routine. But obviously, as things have gone on, it's kind of transpired that it's probably a little bit more deep-rooted than that. Obviously, we had an offer from Wrexham for £300,000 to take Ollie Palmer off our hands, and I think that was a good deal for everybody. So we didn't stand in his way. But of course, it then meant that we had a centre-forward slot to sort of fill, and of course for a couple of games that was sort of vacant, and then we got Sam Cosgrove on loan from Birmingham, who's just come from Shrewsbury. Actually, he was unused sub against us for Shrewsbury about 10 days ago, and he'd done previously well a couple of years ago for Aberdeen. But Shrewsbury fans couldn't wait to get on Twitter and whatever social media platforms you can name to tell us that we bagged an absolute dud, no hope, lazy, disinterested, etc. But on the evidence of the first couple of games, Saturday was his debut at Charlton, and again, it was solid, perhaps unspectacular, but at least, and then it was widely felt that after he then cramped up because he hadn't played a game for a while, after about an hour, our forward play then became more disjointed, and it lacked that kind of focal point, and we weren't really making much headway. And then last night, obviously, gave him another start. He was on for 70 minutes against. Correct me. He was on for the full game against Rotherham, but again, against that kind of defence, who haven't let in 5 goals away from home all season, top of the table, probably favourites, I would say, to clinch the title. Right. Didn't really get much of a looking, but I think that was kind of symptomatic, not necessarily of just him as an individual, but the fact that we didn't generally lay a glove on Rotherham, throughout the whole game, and in particular the second half, which was a bit of a procession for them. Although they did have a slice of luck because Will Grigg, who I'm sure you know very well.
Don't talk to me about him. We'll have no swearing on this channel, Mike. No bad language.
You can beat that one out then, Jack, maybe at a later junction.
Yes.
But he suddenly got injured when it was 0-0.
Oh,
they brought on Joshua Coyote, and then within 5 minutes, he'd got the only goal. So maybe on another night we could have held up for a 0-0, but I think Rotherham didn't really get out of second gear out all night, really, and in the end, got the victory. The things that go their way, I suppose, when you're at the top of the table, and things that go against you when obviously you're scratching away at the other end. So it's a case now that for a number of weeks it's simply been a mindset that people have been talking about. Just make sure we stay ahead of Morecambe, obviously in 21st place. But now look further down, and Gillingham, who didn't get a win in 17 matches, they've now brought in Neil Harris, and they've got 2 wins from 3. So they've got bit of a bouncy going on, if you know what I mean. And of course, we have to go to Gillingham on the Tuesday night in 2 weeks' time. So that's going to be at the very least a do not dare lose kind of game. And again, we've just got to make sure the gap is as extended as much as possible between ourselves and the bottom four. We just need a win, but it's just a case of no one's entirely sure when it's going to come. And we've got Doncaster at home at the end of the month. You guys have just been on the receiving end from them. And even then, bottom of the table, you can't absolutely say that that's going to be a complete walkover. It would at the very least be a real war of attrition. I certainly don't envisage placing a pre-order for the 2-disc special DVD set of that particular game. So yeah, it's just a case of getting the win from somewhere. So yeah, we obviously we can't wait for it, but obviously it's just a case of when it's going to be.
Strange situation with Doncaster. We played them in between Christmas and New Year, about the 27th, and we beat them 3-0. But to be honest, I thought we didn't even get out of second gear, really. If we didn't have to try much, we almost kind of walked the ball into the goal a few times, it seemed. I think if we'd, really upped our intensity, it could have been a heck of a lot more. And yet, they come to the Stadium of Light, and as much as I think that you can argue the formation and the lineup, there was issues on our end regarding that, really. I don't think it warranted that kind of sudden shift into almost them being, the better side than us, really. So I know that they've had the transfer window, but they've really come on a heck of a lot. Something we tend to really struggle against, Mike, is especially from home, I think, is when sides get quite physical and can bully us a little bit. The Wimbledon a particularly physical side, or is that not something we've got to worry about?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that necessarily we go around kicking people. I mean, this isn't the Wimbledon that has the reputation, I think, of the side of, 25, 20, 30, 35 years ago. It's obviously it's a completely different sort of a setup. And if anything, we've got sort of quite some quite young players who are more often than not on the receiving end of the physical side of the game themselves. So I wouldn't say necessarily you've got anything to worry about in terms of potential roughhousing or off the ball challenges or anything particularly over physical. So again, in that respect, I don't see Sunderland emerging maybe with too many bruises, but of course we do remain competitive, and obviously we've got players in there, younger players, obviously with great enthusiasm. I suppose it depends again what the team news is on Saturday itself. We're waiting for a couple of players to come back, so whilst it will be competitive, I can't see it being particularly kind of X-rated. So I think in that respect, I don't think there's anything for Sunderland to worry about. But yeah, obviously some people are advocating maybe a reintroduction of more of a mindset where we've got a bit more of a mean streak about us, where we don't allow ourselves to be bullied. Obviously we'll wait and see how that kind of pans out for the remainder of the season, because obviously something's got to change. We've got to get a win from somewhere. Because on Saturday for about 10 or 20 minutes, I don't know exactly how long it was, we were actually in the bottom four because Morecambe were beating Bolton in the kind of as it stands table. But then obviously Bolton came back with the equaliser in that game that seemed to go on the entirety of Saturday night. And in the end put
Morecambe. Was that one
back.
17 minutes of added time?
Yeah, I think it was either 17. I think it was 20. I think 21. Someone said in the end because of the stoppages in the game that were going on, and it sounded like a real, it sounded like coastal ground, obviously at Morecambe. It sounded like a really bad stag do gone wrong, basically. But we found ourselves eventually back out of the bottom four, it's a case of how we can sort ourselves out potentially for this Saturday. But again, I think Sunderland are obviously due a return to form as well. So. Again, I'm envisaging a very close game. Maybe not with that many goals, but not much potentially to choose between the sides.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be one for Sky Sports highlight reels, and so I don't think it's going to be that type of game. I think it's two sides largely out of form, both looking to kind of get a result. And something that I've noticed, it's happened on 2 or 3 occasions this season where we have been on a poor form of results, some poor performances, and sometimes we end up getting the win, especially against, no disrespect, but a side like of a lesser expectation and a lower league position than us, where we don't necessarily play very well, but we just kind of get a result through doing it, just through getting there in the end and getting over the line. I think any Sunderland fans watching might recall beating Ipswich 2-0 at home. We didn't particularly play very well at all there, but we just, did enough to win, and I think that sparked a short run of a few wins, and I think we went undefeated for a little while after that as well, potentially. So I think I'm just hoping that we can get a win from somewhere. How confident are you that you can get a result though?
Yeah, I mean, given the sort of the results that the two teams have put together recently, obviously our need is greater for a win because obviously we're on the longer run without a victory. Yeah, I mean, and Sunderland as well, again, needing to really sort of click back to form. I mean, of course, I mean, I don't know whether, again, sort of, going back to like the Lee Johnson situation, I don't know whether perhaps Sunderland might have been better served potentially, if they did want to get rid of him, make sure they had a replacement kind of lined up immediately, because obviously, as you mentioned, the three guys who are kind of in charge at the moment. And of course, when a manager goes, obviously you have to install someone immediately just to kind of steady the ship, to pick the side, obviously to give the team talk. So maybe they were again, obviously I don't know the full ins and outs at Sunderland, but maybe they were the only three potentially who may have been available to maybe step in and just steady the ship until, again, Roy Keane or whoever comes in. So again, a lot will depend on whether that managerial situation is resolved before the weekend. And again, obviously you guys have already got the victory against us earlier in the season towards the end of August with I think the deflected goal from Winchester, I think it was. Back on the 21st.
Yeah, it was a corner ball. I think it got headed away, and I think Winchester was one of the lads on the halfway line. He jogged up about 20-25 yards from goal, had a shot, got deflected, went in. And to be honest, I think that goal came at was a little bit of a luxury to us, really. I don't think we played particularly well in that game, but I think it was almost a bit of a lucky goal, really, with it being a deflection. And I think it was a bit of a saving grace, really, on the day for that on that day that goal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, certainly. I mean, the deflection it took was quite sizable, and as you rightly say, until that point, I don't think there was that much to choose between the sides. But then, having got their noses in front, Sunderland had something to not just defend, but then to build on. And then, of course, obviously I was commentating that day, right up in the very upper reaches of the stand. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and you could just tell that gave Sunderland just that little extra sort of little bit of know-how, extra confidence. Obviously, the crowd was lifted by it, and then I think Lee Johnson was able to then make the tactical changes. Not that we were offering that much by way of attacking kind of counter threat, but I think he brought on Nathan Broadhead just to stuck him up top alongside Stewart, I think it was. And then that was enabled Sunderland because sometimes that's how the games pan out. You'd like to be able to win every game 3 or 4-0, whoever the opposition is, but sometimes you get a little bit of a break, and then of course you've just got to hold on to what you've got, because the 3 points is ultimately the most important thing at the end of the day. But we're at the beginning of February now, and obviously the league table finds itself out obviously eventually by the time by the 30th of April. Obviously February the 8th, February the 9th, we're pretty much sort of 2/3, 3/4 of the way there. So the league table is really pretty much found itself out now. Everybody I think who's going to be involved in the promotion races up there or thereabouts, everyone who's going to be fighting relegation is already kind of down there and scrapping for their lives. Whilst I wouldn't say I was particularly confident for Saturday, obviously a big name coming down to play us. Obviously you guys are going to pack the place out. It should be close on 1,500 of you, I would imagine. It's the kind of occasion where previously, given Wimbledon history, where sometimes we have, maybe gone against the grain, sprung back to life, and put in at the very least a very good performance, if not maybe, nick it by the only goal. But again, I can't see any reason to maybe separate the sides at the moment. But again, if Keane comes in, supposedly beforehand, if Jermaine Defoe is picked from the start and, causes our defence, a few problems, and that may well tilt the sort of early balance in your favour. But yeah, I would certainly expect a lively and competitive games. Both teams scrapping away for different reasons at opposite ends of the table. And games have always generally been kind of competitive in the past, so I wouldn't see any reason to maybe see that would change maybe on this coming Saturday.
Yeah, I think the managerial situation, I mean, we've touched on it a few times already in the 20 minutes or so we've been sat here, but the managerial situation, I think at our club's going to be a massive factor, a massive deciding factor on what happens at the weekend. I think if it's the same three remaining in charge, I'm not particularly confident. I don't think they've got it within them to even win a game of football. I don't think they've got any kind of tactical awareness. I don't think they've got any experience of actually managing players. I believe they were picked from the under-23 setup, which is a heck of a lot different to managing, first team football in League One. So I think if we can get an appointment in, and I don't just mean strolled in on the door on Friday evening. I mean with a day or two to kind of, say the lads in training and pick their 11 and actually manage the game as it's going on and not just leave substitution to the last minute when it's too late. I think that's going to be one of the massive factors. Just briefly as well, though, I mean, when Wimbledon do pick up a result, why is it? What are the things we need to look out for? What do Wimbledon try to do?
I mean, they try and keep possession and to just knock the ball around a bit, and again try to work the ball sometimes down the flank. Sometimes they'll try and clip the ball over the top if they see a bit of a sort of a gap, especially with Cosgrove now in the side. Now that we've got someone reinstated into the centre forward position, so I think what we try and do is just sort of just try and vary it, try and kind of take people on. It is a very, very young side that we've got at the moment. We're not absolutely awash with cash. Yeah, absolutely. And we couldn't bring in whoever we wanted on the transfer window. So it's a side with, again, all the enthusiasm you would expect of a generally kind of young side. But at times we've played with just the one up top, which I think has sometimes been our downfall, particularly if we're playing against a side maybe who's employed three centre halves, which is quite a commonplace thing in League One. That means there's the air of feeling extra isolated up top. So, I mean, if we can get players forward, Cosgrove obviously leading the line now. If we get players in and around him, maybe to pick up, the first and kind of the second balls and just keep the pressure going. Because we do look, when we get kind of camped in the opposing half and we, you put a corner in, they clear it, you pick up the ball, you redeliver the ball, then they clear it. If we can maintain a few, periods of play like that where we're setting up a bit of a base camp in and around the opposition goal, then I think that would probably be our best chance maybe. But I think sometimes our attacking play has been a little bit too sporadic. It's been a little bit hit or miss. And it's a case of which Wimbledon turn up in that regard. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of will depend on with Sunderland's well documented defensive difficulties away from home. But when you think of I think it's 32 goals you guys have let in, but 18 of those have been in those four, Sheffield Wednesday, Portsmouth, Rotherham, and Bolton. So I think generally speaking, you kind of limit yourselves to maybe one goal kind of conceded generally kind of away from home. Should have won possibly at Accrington a few weeks ago and allowed them that breakaway equaliser, which I remember I looked at Giles's post-match blog, and he was particularly livid at that one. I saw his review last night as well. So it's just the passion of you guys obviously deserves a hell of a lot more, and obviously with the numbers that you'll have down with us, it's going to be a real a superb occasion. Certainly the first game at the New Plough Lane for you guys in terms of your fans being there, because of course back on the 16th of January with the 3-0, obviously there was nobody there. I'm just expecting a real good occasion, plenty of noise. We generally tend to create a lot more atmosphere ourselves now that we're back in sort of Plough Lane, 200 yards from the old ground. So certainly atmosphere-wise, it's going to be an absolute humdinger, and hopefully the two sides can produce a spectacle worthy of that. But again, I can't see any reason maybe to separate the sides. So if you're sort of fishing for a prediction, I'd go maybe for a 1-1 perhaps.
Well, that was going to be my next question, was a prediction, which I think a large part of it, as you've mentioned, does depend on who we've got on the touchline. I think if we've brought in a manager who can work some magic on the squad and get to know the players quite quickly and sort some problems out that lie within the team, I think this could be the start to a successful new regime under someone else. If not, I think it's just going to be a prolonged process of us not appointing anyone and continuing to be poor. From what the rumours on the street are, it seems as if it is likely that we are going to appoint someone before the end of the week, but uncertain. I think there's been a lot of mixed messaging from the club, really. But I'm going to predict a 1-1 myself, which isn't exactly the most inspiring result. It's not really. I don't think it's really good enough for the team not to go up in the top two. But I think that's just the situation we find ourselves in. But Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, sir. Jack, thanks very much indeed for having me on. And let's hope the best teams draw on Saturday.
Hope the best teams draw. Oh, right, very funny. Yes.
Sorry about it. Too subtle there.
Yeah, straight over my head. Thank everyone for watching as well. If you haven't already, please do leave a like and subscribe. It is free to do so. We are on the path to 10,000 subscribers before the end of the season. If we can do so, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could drop a like and subscribe. But thank you for watching, and we will see you later on. Bye-bye.